Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know, if you feel like the world is just moving faster than ever, you're definitely not alone.
No, not at all.
Our stack of sources this week, it suggests we're living through a period of just extreme acceleration in health, in technology, and I mean, in geopolitical volatility, too.
It's a stunning mix, really, often contradictory.
It is.
It is, yeah. We had to sift through these, monumental leaps forward in human potential things that were honestly science fiction just a decade ago.
Right.
But then at the same time, we're watching political leaders openly, challenge the very foundations of international law and order.
So our mission today, as always, is to give you, the learner, those essential knowledge nuggets to kind of help you understand how all these seemingly separate global events are, well, how they're all connected.
Exactly.
We have a massive deep dive ahead of us. We're going to be focusing heavily on these incredible strides in human health, and I'm talking sight-restoring implants, egg rejuvenation, but also the gritty reality of chronic health management. Then we'll pivot into the accelerating tech landscape, massive AI infrastructure bets, and a revolution in solid-state batteries.
Which is really heating up.
And finally, we have to navigate the messy world of diplomatic crises. We'll be looking at U.S. assertions of dominance in the Caribbean and the Arctic, and of course the visible, very costly impact of climate and weather events all over the globe.
It's a deep dive into the absolute best and maybe the worst of human endeavor, all happening at once.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with some pure optimism, where technology is quite literally restoring one of our most precious senses. We're talking about the RIMA system.
Yes.
This feels like a true milestone in visual prosthetics.
Oh, it really is. This is a genuinely transformative moment in ophthalmology. For decades, researchers have struggled to find viable long-term solutions for people suffering from profound vision loss.
Especially from things like age-related macular degeneration, right? AMD.
Exactly, AMD, which is this chronic progressive condition that damages the macula. That's the central part of the retina. It's a leading cause of blindness in older adults worldwide. A huge problem.
So what makes this photovoltaic retinal implant, the RIMA system,
Yeah.
so fundamentally different from what we've seen before? The other attempts at electronic implants.
It's the approach. It's how it generates the signal. Earlier implants, they often relied on these complex, kind of bulky external cameras and processors to feed a signal in.
Right, I've seen those.
Right.
With the glasses and the wire.
Precisely. The RIMA system, by contrast, is, it's self-contained. It's elegantly simple. It uses a microarray of thousands of tiny photovoltaic cells.
So like a miniature solar panel.
It's essentially a micro solar panel placed directly underneath the damaged area of the retina.
So wait, instead of being powered by some external battery pack, it's taking the ambient light that's just coming into the eye and turning that photon energy into a tiny electrical current right there on the spot.
Precisely. And that electrical signal then bypasses the damaged, dead photoreceptor cells that were destroyed by the AMD.
Okay.
And it directly stimulates the remaining healthy retinal cells, the ones still connected to the optic nerve. The real innovation here is its size and its efficiency, which allows for, a much higher resolution.
The technical side is impressive, sure, but what's the real-world result? What are the trial participants actually seeing?
The reports are exceptional. We are not just talking about detecting light and shadow, being able to tell if a light is on or off.
Yeah.
That characterized the earlier prosthetics.
Right, that was the old benchmark.
The new benchmark is that trial participants have reportedly regained enough functional vision to actually read letters, and critically, to navigate complex, unfamiliar environments on their own.
Wow.
This is restoring high-level functional vision. It's giving them back their autonomy. It is a monumental leap forward from the older generations of these prostheses.
And what's so fascinating is that this prosthetic approach, basically replacing the function of the damaged eye, is happening at the same time as the regenerative approach, which aims to repair the eye itself.
Correct. There are two parallel tracks. The RIMA system is a functional substitution, but complementary research is focusing on using stem cell technology. There are clinical trials underway right now using tiny eye implants made from stem cells.
And is the goal of that stem cell approach to actually replace the photoreceptors that died? Or is it more about providing supportive tissue?
The aim is full-on regeneration. They are trying to replace the retinal pigment epithelium, the RPE cells, which are often the first to fail in conditions like advanced dry AMD.
Yep.
So if they can successfully integrate new, healthy RPE cells, they can prevent further degeneration and potentially restore function just by supporting the retina's natural structure.
So you have two completely different but equally incredible avenues of research.
Exactly. Together, these prosthetic and regenerative lines of research are giving really unprecedented hope to millions of people who are facing blindness.
From the eye to the absolute fundamental processes of life. Let's turn to fertility. This is an area where biology has, for a long time, felt like a very hard deadline.
It has, especially concerning the decline of female fertility with age.
And that challenge is rooted in the quality of the egg, or the oocyte, as women get older, right?
Scientists have been working tirelessly to uncover the exact clues for this decline, and it involves things like the degradation of mitochondrial health, the accumulation of DNA damage within the egg over, decades.
But now we're seeing research suggesting they can actually intervene directly at a cellular level. Tell us about this successful rejuvenation of human eggs that's been demonstrated in the lab.
This is a genuine biological breakthrough. Researchers have identified these pathways, often involving techniques that, in a sense, reboot the cellular environment.
Reboot?
Especially the mitochondrial function. And they can successfully revert the signs of aging in human eggs. It's not reversing the age of the woman, to be clear, but reversing the biological age of that specific reproductive cell.
That sounds like something straight out of science fiction. Taking a cell that has degraded over decades and just hitting a reset button. What are the immediate practical implications, especially for something like IVF?
For in vitro fertilization, the implications are immense. IVF success rates, they drop dramatically for older mothers, primarily because the quality of the eggs leads to a much higher rate of chromosomal abnormalities.
Okay, so the embryos aren't viable.
Exactly. But if you can rejuvenate those eggs, make them biologically younger and healthier, you could significantly improve the viability of the embryos. That would boost IVF's success rates, making the whole process safer and more accessible for women who choose to have children later in life.
And looking further down the road, this could pave the way for what our sources were calling fertility-extending therapies.
That's the grander vision, yes. If these mechanisms for cellular rejuvenation can be safely applied in vivo inside the body, we might move toward therapies that fundamentally extend the reproductive window.
That would change everything.
It would. It raises profound ethical and societal questions, of course. But from a medical standpoint, it pushes the boundaries of what we thought was biologically possible for the human reproductive clock.
Okay, so from these incredible biological promises, let's make a pretty sharp turn to a major public health reality check. This is about one of the most talked about pharmaceutical developments of the last decade. The GLP-1 obesity medications.
Ah, yes. The game changers for weight loss. Drugs like Ozempic or Wegovy.
The sources are highlighting a really significant study here, revealing a very difficult long-term trend. It seems former users of these medications, well, they tend to regain the weight they lost about 18 months after they stop the treatment.
That's right.
We kind of do the drugs required ongoing use, but I want to understand the physiological why. Why does the weight return so aggressively once the medication is stopped?
And that is the crucial insight. These medications work by mimicking a natural hormone that regulates appetite and satiety. It slows down how fast your stomach empties, so you feel full faster and for longer. When you stop taking the drug, the body's natural set point mechanism reasserts itself, and often it does so aggressively. The body perceives that prior rapid weight loss as a kind of starvation event.
So it triggers a defense mechanism?
It triggers a compensatory metabolic response, exactly.
So the body's hormonal regulators, ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and leptin, the satiety hormone, they just get thrown into overdrive.
Precisely. Ghrelin levels often surge, which drives intense hunger and cravings. And your basal metabolic rate, which may have dropped a bit during the weight loss, it stays low. This metabolic shift makes regaining the weight almost inevitable unless you maintain extremely stringent lifestyle changes.
Which is incredibly difficult when your own body's internal hunger signals are just screaming at you.
Exactly.
And the risk here isn't just cosmetic, it's not just disappointment. The study specifically links this weight regain cycle to worsened heart health.
Absolutely. This cycle of rapid weight loss, followed by rapid regain, it's often called weight cycling, it places a significant burden on the cardiovascular system. It can contribute to fluctuating blood pressure, increased strain, and potentially a worse lipid profile than if the person had never lost the weight in the first place.
So this raises a really important question. If this powerful class of medications only manages a chronic condition, rather than curing it and stopping it, can lead to even worse health outcomes.
Right.
Where should the focus shift?
It just underscores the critical need to develop truly sustainable weight management strategies that go beyond just these pharmaceutical options.
Right.
We need solutions that address the underlying metabolic dysregulation for the long term, maybe through precision nutrition, maybe gene therapy, or behavioral interventions that can permanently reset the body's set point, rather than just masking the symptoms with a drug you have to take forever.
Because the current model really risks creating a lifetime dependency for patients.
It does.
Speaking of complex and chronic health challenges, let's look at the emerging understanding of long COVID. It appears to involve persistent clotting issues, or what's the term? Coagulopathy.
Yes, coagulopathy. This is a hypothesis that has been gaining serious scientific support. For a lot of long COVID patients, their symptoms, everything from brain fog to profound fatigue, they just don't align with a typical post-viral syndrome.
And what researchers are consistently observing is reduced blood flow, right?
Right.
Particularly in the tiny blood vessels.
Yes, in the microvasculature. And the reason for this reduced flow appears to be the presence of fibrin microclots.
Okay, fibrin microclots. These seem to be the key culprits.
We do. Fibrin is a protein. It serves as the mesh or the glue when your body forms a normal blood clot to stop you from bleeding. In long COVID patients, they are finding these tiny, dense, insoluble fibrin microclots.
Can you give us an analogy to help the listener understand how these are different from a typical blood clot, like one that causes a deep vein thrombosis?
Sure. Think of your circulatory system like a vast network of plumbing. A typical large blood clot is like a baseball blocking the main sewer line. It causes an obvious large-scale blockage.
Got it.
These fibrin microclots, however, are like tiny grains of coarse, sticky sand, and they're constantly gumming up the filter and the plumbing in the finest capillaries, the microvessels that feed oxygen to your tissues and your brain.
So they're disrupting the flow at the most fundamental cellular level.
Exactly. And if oxygen isn't getting through efficiently, that would explain the systemic fatigue and the brain fog.
And this coagulopathy hypothesis is so significant because it suggests a clear therapeutic target, doesn't it?
It does. If the problem is persistent pathological clotting, then we can use existing or experimental treatments like specific antivirals or anti-inflammatory therapies that also happen to have anti-clotting properties to try and dissolve these microclots.
And potentially alleviate that whole constellation of debilitating symptoms.
That's the hope. It's a move beyond just managing symptoms to actually treating an underlying biological malfunction.
Now, let's look way up to the International Space Station, the ISS. Health issues are not confined to Earth, and NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, had to make a historic decision this week about crew safety.
They did. They executed the first ever medical evacuation of an astronaut from the ISS in its entire 25-year operational history.
The first ever?
It's an immense logistical challenge, and it really highlights the inherent risks of long-duration spaceflight. The Crew 11 mission had to be cut short by over a month due to an undisclosed but stable health issue with one of the crew members.
The level of crisis management required for something like that must be, well, astronomical. You can't just call an ambulance.
No, you can't. The entire operational schedule of the station had to be instantaneously recalculated. The focus shifts entirely to crew health and safety.
Which meant a previously scheduled spacewalk had to be canceled.
Immediately canceled.
Oh.
A crucial task for maintaining the station just gone. Every contingency plan, which for 25 years had only been theoretical, suddenly became very, very real.
And that operational impact, it just ripples outward.
Yeah.
They had to expedite the launch of the next crewed mission, Crew 12, right?
Yes, to maintain the necessary staffing and expertise levels on the ISS, Crew 12's launch sequence had to be accelerated. But NASA Administrator Bill Nelson was very quick to assure everyone that this early return and the schedule shift will not interfere with the timeline for the Artemis II moon mission.
That is a fascinating organizational ability to manage an immediate, unprecedented crisis in low Earth orbit, while simultaneously hitting key milestones for deep space exploration.
It really speaks to the redundancy built into their systems and their planning. We saw progress on the Artemis program this week, too. They completed the Artemis II countdown demonstration.
That's the big dress rehearsal, right?
Exactly. Simulating the high-stakes launch day elements like the crew putting on their spacesuits and boarding the Orion spacecraft.
And crucially, the infrastructure for future deep space travel is being deployed as we speak. Let's talk about the significance of the power and propulsion element, the PPE, for the Gateway space station.
The Gateway is designed to be an orbiting outpost around the moon. It's a vital staging area for future crewed missions, especially those aiming for Mars. The PPE is the Gateway's backbone.
The engine room.
Think of it as the engine room and the primary power source, yes. It uses solar electric propulsion, which is extremely efficient, if low thrust, to maintain the Gateway's unique halo orbit around the moon.
So without the PPE, the Gateway is just an empty shell. With it, it becomes this crucial piece of logistical infrastructure. It ensures reliable power and the thrust needed to adjust the station's path.
That's it, exactly. NASA activating the PPE this week highlights that even in the middle of an ISS medical emergency, the long-term focus remains firmly fixed on the goal, a sustainable deep space presence, and eventually making humanity a multiplanetary species.
From the frontiers of biology and space, let's dive into the technological tectonic shifts happening right here on Earth. Specifically, artificial intelligence, AI, and the sheer physical infrastructure that's required to power it. Elon Musk's XAI is making headlines with a truly colossal investment.
We are talking about an investment that just redefines scale. Elon Musk's XAI plans to construct a massive $20 billion data center complex in South Haven, Mississippi.
$20 billion. That's not just a large investment. That is an economic game changer for that entire region.
It is absolutely transformative. Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves noted this is, by far, the largest corporate investment in the state's history. And that kind of capital, it doesn't just buy servers.
Yeah.
It builds roads, it supports local businesses, it drives massive economic growth. It explicitly positions Mississippi as a significant future hub for AI and machine learning applications, and that shifts economic power dynamics within the U.S.
That kind of infrastructure, housing just unimaginable amounts of data, it immediately raises the stakes for data security, and we're seeing that reflected in some explosive market valuations.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Cyera, the Israeli data security startup. The demand is so intense that just 6 months after being valued at $6 billion, they raised another $400 million, and their valuation catapulted to $9 billion.
Wow.
This huge influx of capital is a market indicator. It shows the critical, escalating demand for these protection mechanisms.
We mentioned the CIA triad in our initial look at the sources.
Yeah.
I think it's crucial we break this down for the listener because this is the fundamental framework that's driving these $9 billion valuations. What does the CIA triad confidentiality, integrity, availability actually mean in the real world?
Yeah.
And what happens when one of those pillars fails?
That is essential context. Cyera and its competitors are built around protecting these 3 pillars. So confidentiality is the simplest one, making sure data is accessed only by authorized people.
Right, keeping secret secret.
Exactly. Failure here means data leakage, industrial espionage, regulatory fines. You lose control of the secret.
Okay, second pillar, integrity.
Integrity ensures the data hasn't been tampered with or corrupted, whether someone did it maliciously or just by accident. Failure here is catastrophic. Imagine if a bank's ledger was silently altered, or a medical record was slightly miswritten, leading to the wrong treatment.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
It is. Cyera uses complex tools to monitor for even tiny unauthorized changes to ensure you can trust the data's accuracy.
And the last one, availability.
And finally, availability. This just means that authorized users can access the data and the systems when and where they need to. A failure in availability is often the result of ransomware or a DDoS attack.
So if your hospital systems or your bank's website are down for 2 days because of the cyber attack, that's an availability failure.
Precisely. And the financial and human costs are enormous. So these startups are worth billions because the cost of failure in any one of those 3 pillars is often exponentially higher.
That certainly puts the $9 billion valuation into perspective. Now, speaking of the high-stakes digital economy and geopolitical tensions, there's a very pointed development regarding one of the most crucial components of AI infrastructure, NVIDIA's specialized H200 chips.
Right. NVIDIA, which is the dominant player in AI chips, has mandated that its Chinese customers must now make full upfront payment for these advanced H200 chips.
So what's the context for this? Is this just about financial assurance, or is there something more strategic going on?
It's highly strategic. This is happening within the context of ongoing tensions where the U.S. government is trying to limit China's access to the most advanced semiconductor technology, the tech that's crucial for training large AI models.
So by requiring full upfront payment.
NVIDIA is managing its financial risk amidst a shifting regulatory environment and potential future export controls. If new U.S. sanctions were suddenly imposed, preventing the shipment, well, the financial commitment is already secured. It forces Chinese buyers to commit completely and manage that regulatory uncertainty on their own end.
Let's transition now to consumer electronics and energy storage, specifically the solid-state battery, or SSB, revolution. This is where it gets really interesting, because this isn't just an incremental improvement. This is a fundamental shift for EVs and portable power.
The solid-state battery has been the holy grail for electric vehicles for a long time, and we are finally seeing the manufacturing breakthroughs needed for mass adoption. South Korean designs are reportedly simplifying what has historically been a very complex and costly manufacturing process.
What are the main advantages that SSBs promise over the current lithium-ion technology we all have in our phones and our EVs?
There are 4 transformative promises. First is dramatically higher safety. SSBs use solid electrolytes instead of flammable liquid gels.
Right, which is what causes the fires.
Exactly. It eliminates the risk of dendrites and thermal runaway, which cause fires. Second is faster charging, with commercial models aiming for under 5 minutes to get a significant charge. Third, a 4 times performance improvement in life cycle and durability.
And the fourth, the one that translates directly into getting rid of range anxiety, superior energy density.
That's the one. We're seeing performance claims of over 400 watt-hours per kilogram. To put that in perspective for you, current high-end EV batteries are usually around 250 to 300 weichi kilograms.
So that's a huge jump.
It's a massive leap in how far an EV can travel on a single charge while keeping the battery size manageable.
We've been hearing about this for years, though. Is this really close to being commercialized?
Yes. Companies like Toyota and QuantumScape are targeting widespread commercial use by 2026. But the competitive tension is already obvious. China's Dongfeng, a major manufacturer, is already aiming for an SSB-powered electric vehicle with a staggering 620-mile range.
620 miles. That number is huge. It does raise a question, though. If Toyota and the others are still perfecting manufacturing for a 2026 rollout, is that 620-mile claim from Dongfeng realistic? Or is that just hype?
That is a critical devil's advocate question.
Are they using some fundamentally different process that gives them a lead?
It's likely a mix. Chinese manufacturers often adopt new technologies very aggressively. Sometimes they prioritize speed over long-term validation, which lets them announce these impressive specs early.
But it also suggests they might be onto something.
It does. It suggests they may be successfully leveraging simpler, more scalable manufacturing methods for specific battery chemistries, kind of leapfrogging the Western approach. Whether it's a sustained commercial reality, that remains to be seen, but it certainly sets a very high benchmark for the global EV race.
We also just wrapped up CES 2026, the Consumer Electronics Show, in Las Vegas, which always gives us a quick snapshot of how AI is infiltrating the home.
And AI was no longer just in the cloud, it was embedded in every single device. LG was showing off AI-enhanced TVs that proactively adapt content and calibration based on real-time viewer data.
And we saw some fun oddities from Razer, too, which is usually known for gaming.
Yes, like the vacuum that climbs stairs.
The stairs-climbing vacuum.
Yes, a vacuum that autonomously climbs stairs, and an advanced body stand scale that uses AI to analyze body composition in just unprecedented detail. The trend is clear. We're moving past just smart homes to seamlessly integrated intelligent environments.
My personal favorite example of embedded innovation, which ties into that seamless experience, was the debut of the Ever Nitro machine.
The sustainable nitro coffee maker. It's a great example of applying smart tech to a niche consumer habit. Instead of relying on those disposable pressurized gas cartridges, the Ever Nitro machine extracts nitrogen directly from the air around it.
It's a small thing, but it's a perfect example of integrating sustainability and premium convenience.
It is.
Now, balancing those exciting innovations is a constant reminder that digital platforms, as powerful as they are often a source of dangerous misinformation. We have a study here concerning health advice being disseminated on TikTok.
This analysis focused specifically on advice for gout on TikTok. Gout is a complex, very painful inflammatory disease caused by a buildup of uric acid crystals in the joints.
And the study found that the vast majority of viral videos, they were providing dangerously misleading or just inaccurate information.
Yes, and they prioritize simple, accessible solutions that appeal to a mass audience, right?
Sure.
They overwhelmingly prioritize simple dietary changes and supplements, often promoting unproven products over established medical treatments like allopurinol or colchicine. This fundamentally misunderstands the disease's complexity.
Which involves significant genetic factors and systemic metabolic issues.
Yeah.
It's not just about what you ate last night.
Exactly. It creates confusion for the listener and a real danger for patients who might rely on social media instead of consulting a physician. It's the difference between engaging content and actual clinical efficacy. The algorithms favor simple, viral content over medically vetted, complex information.
Shifting gears now to data vulnerability. We have a catastrophic government failure right here in the U.S.
Yep.
The Illinois Department of Human Services, or IDHS, data breach. And this wasn't a sophisticated hack. This was negligence.
This is truly alarming just because of the scale and the duration. Over 700,000 residents' personal data, including extremely sensitive Medicaid and Medicare health information, was exposed on the open internet for 4 full years.
4 years.
4 years. And the cause was identified as a catastrophic misconfiguration of an internal mapping tool's privacy settings.
So 4 years of sensitive health data exposed because it sounds like somebody just marked a checkbox incorrectly. That is a clear violation of data privacy laws like HIPAA, and it raises serious legal and ethical liabilities.
It highlights a critical systemic issue. Data breaches from sophisticated attacks are one thing, but this was due to basic internal operational failure. It just screams for enhanced security, auditing, and accountability in our state-run institutions.
A problem we see far too often.
We do. Government entities, particularly at the state and local levels, often lag severely behind the private sector in implementing robust cybersecurity protocols.
And finally, on the tech and governance front, we have the ongoing tensions surrounding the Israeli cyber intelligence firm NSO Group. They're infamous for their Pegasus spyware. They're pushing hard to enter the U.S. market, but they're facing immense criticism over their claims of responsibility.
Their actions are fundamentally contradictory. NSO Group is trying to portray itself as a responsible, ethical technology provider. They even released a transparency report to try and improve their image.
But critics are panning that report.
Yes, as highly selective and insufficient. And the core ethical concern is that Pegasus is military-grade spyware that has been consistently tied to the targeting of journalists, political dissidents, and activists around the globe.
Precisely. Pegasus is classified as an Israeli military export, which inherently links the company's operations to state foreign policy.
And despite their claims that the software is only sold to vetted governments to combat terrorism and crime, its use has been documented in cases that directly contradict human rights standards, including its alleged role in tracking associates of the late journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
So they want legitimacy and massive profits in the U.S. market, while selling tools that bypass international oversight and threaten civil liberties abroad.
It's the ultimate digital oversight challenge. It forces us to constantly question the ethical framework around these technologies of surveillance.
Okay, let's move to the most volatile set of sources we reviewed this week, starting with U.S. foreign policy rhetoric. It seems to center on unilateral action and what critics are calling a new American imperialism. This starts with President Trump's provocative statement that his personal set of morals is the only factor hindering his global dominance ambitions.
That statement, alongside his declaration, and this is a direct quote, "I don't need international law," represents a fundamental ideological challenge to the post-World War II system.
Which was built on multilateral institutions and collective security frameworks.
Exactly. This rhetoric signals a willingness to discard established norms, whether it's UN charters or treaties, if they are perceived as constraining U.S. power.
And this philosophy, it immediately manifests in renewed hard stances against countries the U.S. views as adversarial, specifically Cuba and most aggressively Venezuela. Let's detail the escalation of the military and economic pressure campaign against Venezuela's oil trade.
The campaign has moved from sanctions to direct military interdiction. In just 3 days, the U.S. seized multiple sanctioned oil tankers in the Caribbean, the Olina, the Marinera, and the M. Sofia. These tankers were carrying crude oil that was destined for sale.
And the practical outcome of seizing these ships.
The vessels and their cargo, which is estimated to be between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil, are routed into U.S.-controlled accounts. This is a massive economic pressure point. It deprives the Venezuelan government of billions in revenue and creates significant financial leverage.
And according to veteran journalist Seymour Hersh, The motivations behind these raids and even prior alleged abduction attempts of President Maduro, they go beyond just enforcing sanctions.
Hirsch claimed the primary strategic aim was to cut off China's long-term access to Venezuela's vast oil reserves. The U.S. views China's dependence on foreign oil, particularly from non-allied nations, as a major economic and strategic vulnerability.
So by cutting off this supply, the U.S. seeks to weaken both Venezuela and, indirectly, China.
That's the strategic argument, yes.
This aggressive action in international waters, bypassing customary maritime law, under the pretext of unilateral sanctions, it has drawn some sharp international reaction.
Immediately, Russia condemned the blockade as an act of aggression and a clear violation of international law, seeing it as destabilizing the region.
And the Catholic Church weighed in?
The highest level, yes. Pope Leo XIV, in a very rare and significant foreign policy address, specifically condemned countries, he didn't name the U.S., but the implication was clear, that use military force to assert dominance, stressing that such actions violate the international legal order and undermine global peace.
But this rhetoric is also facing domestic tension. The U.S. Senate is simultaneously seeking to limit the president's military actions in Venezuela.
It is. It reflects a concern about overreach and the unauthorized use of force. It's a classic separation of powers debate happening in real time.
And yet, amidst all this pressure, the president is scheduled to meet with top U.S. oil executives, ExxonMobil, Chevron, to discuss a potential $100 billion investment in Venezuela's oil infrastructure, contingent on regime change.
It highlights the deeply complex and often contradictory intersection of military pressure, political control, and massive economic interests.
The reverberations of this assertion of dominance are being felt globally, and perhaps nowhere more dramatically than in the high-stakes Arctic standoff over Greenland.
This goes back to President Trump's long-standing, publicly stated desire to purchase the autonomous Danish territory of Greenland. And while it's often treated as a kind of diplomatic eccentricity, the response from Denmark demonstrates just how serious the military implications of this interest really are.
The Danish Defense Ministry's response was shocking in its clarity.
It was stark. They warned that in the event of an invasion or a forceful acquisition attempt related to U.S. interest, their soldiers are authorized under a Cold War-era protocol from 1952 to shoot first and act without awaiting commands.
Shoot first.
That is the highest level of military readiness, and it's aimed at protecting national sovereignty against a NATO ally. That indicates the perceived severity of the threat.
And the people of Greenland, caught in the middle of this diplomatic chess match.
They've expressed clear frustration and a strong demand for self-determination. They view the acquisition idea as crazy, and they're emphasizing their distinct identity, their cultural ties to Denmark, and their unwillingness to be treated as a piece of real estate in a geopolitical standoff.
And now the European Union is getting involved as well.
Yes, the EU foreign policy chief confirmed that the bloc is actively discussing a potential unified European response to the U.S. interest. Europe views this as more than just a dispute between the U.S. and Denmark.
It's a threat to sovereignty.
It's a threat to the sovereignty of a NATO ally and a destabilizing force in the strategically vital Arctic region. It's prompting a much broader European defense conversation.
Let's shift our focus to global trade disputes and internal conflicts, starting with the massive EU-Mercosur trade deal.
This is a landmark agreement. It took 25 years of grueling negotiations to provisionally conclude between the EU and the Mercosur bloc. That's Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. It's poised to be one of the largest trade deals in EU history.
But that word provisional is key, isn't it? Because its fate hinges entirely on the approval of two powerful member states, France and Italy.
That's where political reality hits the trade ambition. President Macron has already announced that France will vote against the deal. This opposition is driven by powerful protectionist sentiments from French farmers, coupled with deep concerns over environmental standards.
Specifically, the deforestation linked to Brazilian beef imports.
That's the main sticking point, yes. So it's a clash between the EU's global free trade ambitions and its commitments to climate change mitigation and protecting local agricultural interests.
And Italy shares those concerns.
Italy has similar apprehensions, emphasizing the need for robust safeguards to protect their local industries. They're fearing unfair competition from cheaper South American agricultural products. This stalemate really reflects a broader global tension. How do you reconcile mass trade agreements with national environmental and protectionist goals?
Switching to Asia, we have tensions between the U.S. and India, fueled by a narrative conflict over recently imposed U.S. tariffs.
The U.S. imposed a massive 50% tariff on certain Indian imports. What makes this so newsworthy is the alleged reason for the deal stalling. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick claimed the deal stalled because Prime Minister Modi failed to call President Trump to finalize it.
So the suggestion is that a high-stakes, multi-billion-dollar trade policy may have been driven by personal pique over a missed phone call.
That is the interpretation being widely discussed. If it's true, it's a startling example of how personal ego and transactional diplomacy, rather than established trade policy, can dictate multi-billion-dollar economic decisions and destabilize markets.
And what was India's official response?
India officially rejected that explanation as not accurate. They asserted that while they remain interested in a beneficial trade deal, the tariff policy was unwarranted and completely unrelated to the communication, or lack thereof, between the leaders.
In the Middle East, we're seeing renewed conflict in Syria, focusing on the highly fragile security situation in Aleppo.
Heavy fighting erupted between the Syrian army and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, after reconciliation talks collapsed. It just demonstrates that even local ceasefires are tenuous.
And this conflict is fundamentally a battle over the future governance structure of Syria, isn't it?
It is. The SDF, which controls significant areas of northern and eastern Syria, demands decentralized governance. They want autonomy, self-rule for the regions they control.
And the Syrian government.
The government, led by Bashar al-Assad, insists on restoring a centralized power structure. And this ideological rift, autonomy versus centralization, it just ensures the cycle of conflict persists, trapping civilians in a state of ongoing uncertainty.
Moving to global governance, the United Nations has issued a stern financial warning, and it seems primarily aimed at the U.S. administration.
The UN reiterated that the U.S. has a legal obligation to pay its outstanding financial commitments, its annual dues, or risk losing its voting rights in the General Assembly.
Which would be a huge deal.
It would. The warning underscores the potential impact of this. The U.S.'s financial power gives it influence, but withholding those funds undermines the institution and, ironically, threatens to diminish U.S. influence on the floor of the General Assembly.
And finally, a massive concern regarding global nuclear stability, the New START nuclear arms control treaty with Russia.
President Trump has expressed openness to letting the 2010 treaty expire. He believes he can negotiate a better agreement. New START is the last remaining treaty regulating the strategic nuclear arsenals of the world's two largest nuclear powers.
And it provides verifiable limits on warheads and delivery systems.
Crucially, yes. Verifiable limits and routine inspections.
So what are the consequences if this treaty just lapses?
Arms control advocates are warning that abandoning New START would trigger a renewed, costly, and potentially destabilizing arms race. Without those verifiable limits, neither side would have transparency into the other's arsenal, which leads to fear and a rapid, unregulated nuclear buildup.
So the president's stance, prioritizing a potential future better deal over an existing functioning stability mechanism, is creating major global security concerns.
Immense concerns, yes.
On a more positive note, for multilateral institutions, the UN Human Rights Council has unanimously elected Indonesian Ambassador Siddhartha Riza Sudiodipuro as its president for 2026.
Yes, the first Indonesian to hold that role.
Which is a significant diplomatic achievement for Indonesia.
It is. It signals its growing role in global human rights advocacy. And while his election was unanimous from the Asia-Pacific group, it is worth noting the complex political backdrop. The election of the vice president, Ecuador's ambassador, faced opposition from Bolivia and Cuba, which just indicates the persistent ideological divides that exist within the council.
Let's turn our attention to the immediate, visible, and incredibly costly impact of accelerating extreme weather events around the globe. Starting in Europe, Storm Goretti has caused massive disruption.
Storm Goretti was a powerful event that really highlighted the vulnerability of our aging infrastructure. We saw a wind gust recorded at a staggering 99 miles per hour in the Isles of Scilly in the UK.
And the resulting wind damage left tens of thousands without power.
About 65,000 properties without power in the UK, yes. And the disruption was even more severe across the English Channel in France,
where 380,000 homes lost power.
Yes. And that kind of widespread, simultaneous power failure across two major economies, it requires an immense emergency response and recovery effort. It often costs hundreds of millions in infrastructure repairs and economic loss.
And across the globe, we have catastrophic wildfires consuming parts of Australia, signaling the return of those high heat conditions that are reminiscent of the worst fire seasons.
In Victoria, the fires have been officially deemed catastrophic. And they're being tragically likened to the devastating 2019-2020 Black Summer fires. Temperatures soared to an extreme 46 degrees Celsius.
That's 115 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which created fuel conditions that were just almost impossible to manage.
An observation from a fire captain really stuck with me. He described the conditions as undefendable in some areas.
That word, undefendable, it highlights the scale of the problem. When temperatures reach that extreme, the speed and ferocity of the fire just exceed the capacity of traditional firefighting methods. Over 35,000 hectares of land have been devastated.
And from the heat of Australia to the cold of Antarctica, we have a very visible, very ominous sign of melting ice that caught international attention.
We're talking about Antarctica's largest and oldest iceberg, A23A. It's twice the size of the city of Mumbai, and it is currently turning a striking blue color.
Blue, what does that mean?
The color change is due to meltwater pooling on its surface and eventually draining off. Icebergs are typically white because of trapped air bubbles, which scatter all colors of light.
Okay.
When that surface ice melts and refreezes, those air bubbles are squeezed out. The resulting structure absorbs the red light spectrum, reflecting only the shorter blue light wavelengths.
So the blue color is a direct physical sign of melting.
It signals significant, persistent melting and the destabilization of the iceberg structure. It's an immense visual alarm, directly raising concerns about global sea level rise and the accelerating impacts of climate change on our polar regions.
It connects the dots perfectly, doesn't it? The same warming that fuels Storm Goretti in Europe and the extreme heat in Australia is destabilizing the polar ice sheets.
Exactly.
We also saw a tragedy in the Philippines related to infrastructure failure that was compounded by weather.
Yes, in Cebu City, Philippines, a deadly landfill collapse occurred after a period of heavy rain. The moisture destabilized this enormous mountain of waste, sending it tumbling down and trapping dozens of sanitation workers.
1 confirmed dead, at least 27 missing.
And authorities are concerned about more than just the physical debris. Beyond the poor structural integrity and the initial loss of life, they are extremely concerned about explosions from trapped methane gas within that massive pile of debris.
The methane is a potent byproduct of decomposing waste.
And when it's confined, it poses a severe fire and explosion risk, which complicates recovery efforts and highlights the critical need for proper, regulated waste management infrastructure, especially in regions that are prone to heavy rainfall.
Let's shift to law enforcement and social fault lines within the United States, focusing on the fatal ICE, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement shooting in Minneapolis.
This incident involved the fatal shooting of a U.S. citizen, Renee Good, who was 37, by an ICE agent in Minneapolis during an operation. The event immediately sparked massive community outrage, leading to large protests demanding transparency and accountability.
And the political tension surrounding the investigation escalated almost immediately.
It did. Local Minneapolis officials claimed that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, blocked their access to the probe. This created a significant jurisdictional conflict, and it fueled suspicions of a cover-up among community leaders.
And then the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, drew fierce criticism.
Yes, for prematurely labeling the victim's actions as domestic terrorism before a full investigation had concluded. A congressman even labeled her an idiot for the comment.
And this incident, as tragic as it is, it highlights a systemic finding about this specific federal agency.
It does. The situation underscores the finding that ICE has officially grown to become the largest law enforcement agency in the United States. And this vast size prompts significant concerns among civil rights advocates about regulation, oversight, and the potential for abuse of power.
Especially given the agency's central role in controversial immigration enforcement and its perceived lack of transparency.
Yes.
We also saw a painful contrast this week concerning corporate ethics and vulnerable populations, particularly with homelessness during extreme weather.
In Manchester, in the UK, on a night when temperatures dropped to a sub-zero -6 degrees Celsius, 2 homeless men tried to book a room at a Holiday Inn hotel.
And they were denied entry.
Denied entry despite having the funds because the staff cited a corporate policy against admitting individuals who are deemed vulnerable or who don't have adequate identification. This decision sparked massive public outrage.
And we have this bizarre yet humanizing anecdote that serves as a direct counterpoint to that corporate rigidity. The fiancé who discovered his partner spent $11,000 in joint funds on secret hotel bills.
This story went viral. The fiancé had secretly spent that significant sum, $11,000, putting up his homeless family, including his mother, who had lost her home to foreclosure.
And his partner found out and threatened to break the engagement.
Yes, if the unauthorized spending didn't stop.
That contrast, it forces you to wonder if we've outsourced our moral obligation from corporate policy, which cited liability for refusing shelter down to that fiancé's personal checking account.
That's the exact reflection needed here. The Holiday Inn cites rigid policy to avoid liability and cost. The individual, driven by personal loyalty and ethics, absorbs this massive cost until it strains his core relationship. It perfectly illustrates the fault lines in our society over who we expect to shoulder the financial and ethical responsibility for vulnerable populations.
Let's finalize this section with the economy, starting with the pretty somber warning from the UN.
The United Nations has revised its global growth forecast for 2026 downward to 2.7%. This slowdown is primarily attributed to rising U.S. tariffs, policy uncertainty in trade, and the escalating volatility of the geopolitical tensions we just discussed. The forecast reflects the high fragility of the global market.
And General Motors, GM, is facing a huge financial hit, signaling a cautious approach to the EV transition.
GM is incurring a significant $7.1 billion financial hit. That includes $6 billion due to previously allocated but now unused EV investments. They are scaling back their electrification plans.
This isn't just a simple adjustment, though. It reflects broader market pressures, doesn't it?
It signals a necessary strategic retrenchment. GM, like others, seems to have miscalculated the speed of mass consumer adoption for EVs. They're facing intense competition, supply chain hurdles, and consumer hesitation over charging infrastructure and high initial costs.
So they're moving away from aggressive electrification deadlines to focus on sustainable profitability.
A more cautious, measured approach, yes.
And finally, a small but important victory for the hospitality industry in the UK.
The hospitality industry successfully lobbied the government to water down proposed business rate rises specifically for pubs. This was a targeted fiscal measure aimed at supporting local businesses that serve as community anchors.
And predictably, the success immediately prompted other businesses to call for the same treatment.
Yes, small retailers, restaurants, they're now calling for similar inclusion in the government's backtrack, arguing for a more equitable fiscal framework across the entire commercial sector.
To wrap up our deep dive, let's touch on culture and history, starting with a controversy in Spain that touches on these long-standing debates about racial stereotyping in European traditions. The blackface incident in Andalusia.
During the Epiphany celebration, Juanma Moreno, who is the regional president of Andalusia, made a highly controversial decision to wear blackface to portray Balthazar, one of the three wise men.
And this action immediately ignited outrage.
It did, among critics, activists, and marginalized communities. The core of the criticism is that regardless of the historical religious context, where Balthazar is often depicted as a black character, the practice of a white person wearing blackface is rooted in racially insensitive minstrelsy traditions, and it perpetuates harmful stereotypes.
Absolutely. And this incident is directly tied to the broader ongoing debate across Europe, most notably the persistent Black Pete custom in the Netherlands.
Yes. Black Pete, Sinterklaas's helper, has faced years of scrutiny for its overtly racist characterization. And while public support for these traditional blackface customs is decreasing across Western Europe, the fight against racial stereotyping under the guise of tradition continues.
With activists advocating for the roles to be filled by black actors or just replaced entirely.
Exactly.
We also saw the BAFTA long list released, which resulted in some notable Hollywood snubs.
It was a surprisingly competitive field. Big names like Dwayne Johnson and George Clooney were notably absent from the long list. And since the BAFTAs often act as a crucial precursor to the Oscars, these omissions are sparking conversations about evolving industry trends and the criteria being prioritized by voters.
It just shows that star power alone isn't enough to secure a nomination anymore.
No, it isn't.
Speaking of Clooney, we saw reports that his decision to obtain French citizenship ruffled some feathers with President Trump, adding a layer of political tension to celebrity news.
Clooney, who's known for his political activism and progressive views, made a public move toward a national identity that aligns perhaps more closely with European diplomatic norms.
And the president's reaction, which reportedly involved criticism of Clooney's political stances, highlights how even personal choices about national identity can instantly become politicized.
It reflects the deep cultural and political divides across the Atlantic, yes.
Meanwhile, another high-profile figure from Hollywood, Harvey Weinstein, is facing a critical legal juncture regarding his conviction.
Weinstein is set to appear at a pivotal hearing that will determine whether he gets a new trial. This is based on claims that the previous jury was unduly pressured into reaching a guilty verdict.
And this is happening as his legal team is reportedly considering a guilty plea to resolve a third-degree rape charge in a separate matter.
Right. The case continues to be central to broader conversations about accountability and the long-term impact of the #MeToo movement in the entertainment industry.
Okay, let's lighten the mood with a truly random, fascinating historical anecdote before we wrap up.
Did you know that Abraham Lincoln nearly joined the infamous Donner Party?
Wait, the Donner Party. The one known for being snowbound in the Sierra Nevada mountains and tragically resorting to cannibalism.
The very one.
That is a close call that would have fundamentally altered U.S. history.
It's a fantastic, often overlooked historical fact. It illustrates not only Lincoln's just emphasizes the extreme, bizarre circumstances that pioneers faced. It's a profound reminder of how close history often comes to completely shifting course based on a seemingly minor personal decision.
And finally, on a light note, who could forget the woman who went viral after falling into the sea during an interview?
Anne Hughes. It was a completely spontaneous moment of absurdity during a coastal report that just resonated instantly with viewers online. Despite the initial shock, Hughes embraced her newfound viral notoriety. It just demonstrates the unpredictable and often humorous nature of social media fame.
Moving into our sports wrap-up, we had a major NHL milestone this week.
Patrick Kane, a true veteran of the sport, scored his 500th NHL career goal. He became only the 5th U.S.-born player to achieve this monumental feat. It's a testament to his enduring skill and dedication.
In football, specifically the Premier League, Liverpool seems to have stabilized their defense after a difficult period, but they are lacking something important in their attack.
Yeah, analysis suggests that while they've managed to stop the bleeding of poor results and defensive frailties, they're missing their old cutting edge in attack. The organization and defense are stable, but they're struggling to convert high-quality opportunities into goals, which is leading to frustrating draws instead of wins.
Elsewhere in the NFL, Arthur M. Blank, the owner of the Atlanta Falcons, had to issue a public letter to fans addressing recent team developments, reflecting the immense pressure happening after a difficult season.
And in the college ranks, Washington quarterback Damon Williams Jr. announced his decision to return to the Huskies. This came despite recent turmoil involving his agent, who had severed ties with him following attempts to negotiate a reportedly lucrative $4 million contract.
So his return should stabilize the team's quarterback position amidst a turbulent offseason.
That's the hope.
What an incredible sweep of information. We've covered ground from the microscopic level of rejuvenated eggs and sight-restoring implants all the way to $20 billion AI data centers and the aggressive repositioning of geopolitical power in the Caribbean and the Arctic.
So what does it all mean? The overarching theme that connects everything we've discussed, the new batteries, the AI infrastructure, the medical breakthroughs, is the rapid acceleration of human innovation. We have the capability to solve blindness and prolong fertility. But this ingenuity is constantly tested and often undermined by human governance failures.
Failures characterized by diplomatic collapses, political leaders openly disregarding international law, trade policies driven by personal ego, and critical security lapses like that IDHS breach. It feels like we are innovating at the speed of light, but governing at the speed of a Cold War relic.
And this brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the learner, to consider. Given the incredible, pervasive power of new AI tools, the increasing militarization of law enforcement, with ICE becoming the largest U.S. agency, and the controversial reach of military-grade spyware technology from the NSO group, we have to ask,
what is the moral framework that you believe should govern these new, pervasive tools of influence if, as some political leaders assert, international law is no longer required or relevant?
A question worth dwelling on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this has equipped you to continue your own exploration of these critical global developments. We'll talk to you next time.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.